Madison Taylor adjusted her sleek black blazer as she stepped out of the glass elevator on the 42nd floor. The architectural firm's latest project had just received approval. The multi-million-dollar contract would secure her position as one of New York's most sought-after architects. At 28, she had everything perfectly planned: a thriving career, a wedding in 4 days, and a future that looked flawless on paper. Her phone buzzed as she walked toward her corner office. Without looking, she assumed it was Nathan confirming their dinner plans. They had been together for 2 years, engaged for 6 months, and their relationship felt as carefully constructed as one of her building designs. The message was brief. "We're going in different directions. I'm sorry." Madison stopped walking. The bustling office around her seemed to fade into background noise as she read the words again. Then again, her hands trembled as she dialed Nathan's number, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried 3 more times with the same result. "Madison, are you okay?" Her assistant, Jenny, appeared beside her with a concerned expression. "I'm fine," Madison managed, though her voice sounded hollow even to herself. "Just need to make some calls." She locked herself in her office and spent the next hour trying to reach Nathan. No answer. No explanation. Just silence were her future. Used to be 4 days before their wedding, and he had ended their engagement with a text message. Madison stared out at the Manhattan skyline, her reflection ghost-like in the window. She had sent out invitations to 200 guests. The cathedral was booked. The flowers were ordered. Her dress hung in her closet like a promise that would never be kept. Her phone rang. Her mother. "Darling, I just spoke with the caterer about the final head count." "Mom, stop." Madison's voice cracked. "The wedding is off." The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like an eternity. "What do you mean off?" "Nathan broke up with me." Through a text message, another pause, and Charlotte Taylor's voice returned, sharp and practical. "Don't be dramatic, Madison. I'm sure it's just cold feet. Men get nervous. We can fix this." But Madison knew there was nothing to fix. She had built her life like one of her buildings. All clean lines and perfect angles, but apparently Nathan had found the foundation lacking. "I'm going home," she told Jenny, grabbing her purse. "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the week." The elevator ride down felt endless. Each floor that passed reminded her of how far she was falling. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual energy, but Madison felt disconnected from it all. She walked the 20 blocks to her apartment, hoping the physical movement might help. Her process what had just happened. In her minimalist living room, surrounded by awards and architectural magazines, Madison finally allowed herself to cry. Not the gentle tears of a romantic movie, but the raw, ugly sobs of someone whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed. She turned off her phone and closed the blinds. For the first time in years, Madison Taylor had nowhere to be and nothing to build. All she had was the wreckage of what she thought was her life. 3 days later, Madison forced herself to leave her apartment. She had ignored 17 calls from her mother, 12 from her wedding planner, and countless messages from concerned friends. The world expected explanation. She wasn't ready. To give, her feet led her through unfamiliar streets in Brooklyn, away from her usual haunts in Manhattan. She needed to be somewhere Nathan had never been, somewhere that held no memories of their life together. A small café appeared, almost, hidden between a vintage bookstore and a laundromat. Hand-painted letters on the window read "Bruin's Sketch," and soft jazz music drifted onto the sidewalk. Madison pushed open the door, drawn by the promise of anonymity. The interior was warm and lived in, nothing like the sleek restaurants she'd usually frequented. Its mismatched furniture, exposed brick walls, and the rich aroma of coffee beans created an atmosphere that felt like a refuge. Madison chose a corner table and ordered chamomile tea, hoping it might calm her frayed nerves. She sat there watching strangers come and go. She noticed a man at a table near the window. He was sketching in a worn notebook, completely absorbed in his work. There was something peaceful about him. His clothes were simple, well-worn jeans and a faded green sweater. His dark hair was slightly unkempt, and he had the kind of stubble that suggested he hadn't looked in a mirror that morning. But his concentration was absolute, as if the world outside his sketchbook didn't exist. "He's here every day," the waitress said, following Madison's gaze. "Doesn't talk much, but he's got talent. Always drawing buildings and bridges." Madison found herself curious about this quiet stranger. As an architect, she wondered what he was creating with such focus. When he looked up to reach for his coffee, their eyes met briefly. He had kind eyes, she noticed, tired but kind. An hour passed in comfortable silence. Madison felt her shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. When the man finally closed his notebook and stood to leave, he glanced her way again. "Excuse me, Madison," found herself saying before he reached the door. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I noticed you're an artist." "I'm an architect, and I was curious about your work." He turned back, seeming surprised but not annoyed by the interruption. "Just sketches," he said, his voice quiet but warm. "Special? I'm Ethan Walker," he added after a moment. "Madison Taylor." "You look like you could use some company," Ethan said, turning to his table and gesturing to the chair across from him. Sometimes sitting alone isn't the same as finding peace. There was something in his tone that suggested he understood solitude intimately. Madison joined him, and they talked easily about architecture, about the city, about the way light fell through the cafe windows. Ethan asked no personal questions, offered no unsolicited advice. He simply listened when she spoke and shared gentle observations about the world around them. For 2 hours, Madison forgot about wedding dresses and broken engagements. She forgot about the mess her life had become. In this stranger's quiet presence, she remembered what it felt like to breathe without her chest aching. When she finally stood to leave, Ethan said, "This place serves decent coffee, if you ever need somewhere to sit quietly again." Madison nodded, surprised by how much she hoped she would see him again. Walking home through the Brooklyn streets, she realized something had shifted. The pain was still there, but alongside it was something unexpected. Curiosity about tomorrow, and about the kind stranger who had offered her a few hours of peace without asking for anything in return. Madison returned to Bruin's sketch the next afternoon, telling herself she just needed a quiet place to think. But when she saw Ethan at his usual table, she felt a flutter of relief. His presence had become unexpectedly comforting. "Back for the world's most mediocre chamomile tea?" asked with a slight smile as she approached. "It's growing on me," she replied, taking the seat across from him. "What are you working on today?" Ethan turned his notebook toward her, revealing detailed sketches of the Brooklyn Bridge. His drawings captured not just the structure, but the life around it, the way shadows fell between the cables, the small figures of pedestrians crossing between the towers. "You're incredibly talented," Madison said, studying the intricate line work. "These are professional quality." "Where did you study?" A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "MIT, actually. Structural engineering." But that was a long time ago. Something in his tone suggested there was more to that story, but Madison didn't push. They had developed an unspoken agreement about respecting each other's boundaries. As they talked, Madison found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't experienced in years. With Nathan, conversations had always felt like negotiations, careful exchanges where they both monitored their words. If Ethan's silence was comfortable and words flowed naturally. "I have to ask you something," Madison said suddenly, surprising herself. "And it's going to sound completely insane." Ethan raised an eyebrow but waited patiently. "I need a husband, just temporarily, just for one evening." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. She explained about the charity gala her family hosted annually, how all of New York's elite would be there, how showing up alone after her very public engagement would be social suicide. Her firm had 3 major clients who would be attending, contracts worth millions that could disappear if she became the subject of gossip and pity. "I know how it sounds," she said quickly, "and I know we barely know each other, but you're the only person I've met recently who feels real. Everyone else in my life is connected to Nathan somehow, or they're trying to fix me, or they look at me like I'm broken." Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. "I could pay you," Madison continued, her cheeks burning with embarrassment, "and it would just be for a few hours. We'd show up, shake some hands, let people see that I'm fine, and then we'd leave. No one would ever have to know it wasn't real. Silence stretched between them. Madison immediately regretted the impulse that had made her voice such a ridiculous idea. "When is this gala?" Ethan asked finally. "Tomorrow night? I know it's short notice, and I completely understand if you think I'm crazy. What would I need to wear?" Madison blinked. "A suit, but I could arrange for that, if you're actually considering this." Ethan studied her face carefully. "Why me, Madison?" "Madison." Really, she thought about it for a moment, wanting to give him an honest answer, "Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to pretend to be someone else. And because you're the first person who's made me feel like maybe being alone isn't the worst thing that could happen to me." Ethan closed his notebook and leaned back in his chair. "If we do this, it's not about the money. And afterward, if you want to forget this conversation ever happened, I'll understand." "So you'll do it?" He nodded slowly. "I'll do it. But I have one condition." "What?" "Tomorrow night, you don't pretend to be fine if you're not. You don't have to perform for me." Madison felt tears prick her eyes at his unexpected kindness. "Deal." As she walked home that evening, Madison wondered what she had just gotten herself into. She was about to take a complete stranger to the most important social event of her year. And somehow that felt less terrifying than facing it alone. The grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and the carefully orchestrated wealth of New York's elite. Madison stood at the entrance in her midnight blue gown, her hand resting lightly on Ethan's arm. The suit she had arranged for him fit perfectly, transforming him from the casual café regular into someone who belonged in this rarefied world. "Breathe," Ethan murmured as they approached the reception line. "You're doing fine." Madison's parents greeted them with the polished smiles of experienced hosts. She caught the question in her mother's eyes when she introduced Ethan as her companion for the evening. "Walker," her father repeated, shaking Ethan's hand. "That name sounds familiar. Are you in business here in the city?" "I keep a low profile," Ethan replied diplomatically, as they moved through the crowd. Madison was surprised by how naturally Ethan navigated the social choreography. He asked thoughtful questions, listened attentively to lengthy stories about summer homes and art collections, somehow managed to deflect personal inquiries without seeming evasive. Madison, darling, Caroline Ashworth, one of her mothers, closest friends, descended upon them with predatory enthusiasm. "I was so sorry to hear about Nathan. Such a shame, but I suppose it's better to discover these things before the wedding." Madison felt her smile freeze, but Ethan's hand found hers, his thumb brushing reassuringly across her knuckles. "Actually," he said with quiet confidence, "I think we're both grateful that life led us to each other when it did." The sincerity in his voice made Madison's breath catch. For a moment, she almost believed it herself. The evening progressed smoothly, until James Morrison, one of her firm's biggest clients, approached with his wife. Madison had been dreading this encounter all week. "Madison, I have to say, you're handling this whole situation with remarkable grace," Morrison said, his tone suggesting he viewed her like a curiosity. "Though I did wonder about the Taylor-Morrison project timeline, given everything that's happened." Madison felt her professional composure slipping. The implication was clear. Her personal drama was making him question her reliability. "Mr. Morrison," Ethan interjected smoothly, "I've had the pleasure of reviewing Madison's work, and I can assure you that her commitment to excellence has never wavered. In fact, I'd argue that recent experiences have only strengthened her perspective on creating lasting, meaningful structures." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "And what's your background, Mr. Walker? Structural engineering primarily? Though I prefer to let the work speak for itself rather than credentials." There was something in Ethan's manner that commanded respect. Morrison nodded approvingly and moved on to discuss project details with newfound enthusiasm. "How did you do that?" Madison whispered as they moved toward the bar. "Do what?" "Make him take me seriously again. He was ready to pull the contract an hour ago." Ethan ordered them both champagne, because you deserve to be taken seriously. Sometimes people just need to be reminded of what they already know. As the evening wore on, Madison found herself watching Ethan with growing curiosity. He moved through the crowd with the ease of someone accustomed to formal events. despite his claims of keeping a low profile. When Senator Williams approached to discuss infrastructure funding, Ethan engaged in a conversation about engineering standards that revealed a depth of knowledge beyond casual interest. During a quiet moment on the terrace, Madison finally asked, "Who are you really, Ethan Walker?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the city lights. Someone who learned that having everything on paper doesn't mean you have anything at all. Before Madison could ask what he meant, her mother appeared in the doorway. "Madison, dear, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" It's in the hotel's powder room. Charlotte Taylor wasted no time. "He's not who he seems, Madison. I've been asking around, and no one knows anything about him." "Oh, maybe that's exactly what I need right now," Madison replied. "Someone who doesn't come with a history that everyone wants to analyze. Don't be naive. Men like that want something. Money, connections, status. Be careful you don't make another mistake so soon after the last one." But as Madison returned to the ballroom and saw Ethan waiting for her, with patient concern in his eyes, she realized her mother was wrong. If anything, Ethan seemed to want less from her, not more. The evening ended with them sharing a taxi back to Brooklyn. As they sat in comfortable silence, Madison reflected on how different the night had been from what she'd expected. Instead of feeling like she was performing a role, she had felt genuinely supported. "Thank you," she said, as the taxi pulled up to her building. "For everything tonight." "Thank you for trusting me with it," Ethan replied. As Madison watched the taxi disappear into the night, she realized that what had started as a desperate solution to a social problem had become something else entirely. She was beginning to care about Ethan Walker, and that terrified her more than any charity gala ever could. Madison spent the weekend thinking about Ethan. Their arrangement was supposed to be finished, but she found herself missing their conversations at the café. Monday morning brought an unexpected development when James Morrison called personally to discuss expanding their project scope. "I have to say, Madison, your companion the other evening made quite an impression. Any man who can discuss sustainable engineering practices with that level of insight is worth knowing. I'd like to invite you both to lunch this week to discuss some ideas." After ending the call, Madison realized she had no way to contact Ethan except through the cafe. She arrived at Bruin's Sketch Tuesday afternoon, hoping to find him at his usual table. Instead, she found an empty notebook and a man in an expensive suit arguing quietly with the barista. "Where is Mr. Walker?" the man was asking. "He was supposed to meet me here." "He doesn't usually come in on Tuesdays," the barista replied nervously. Madison approached, curiosity overcoming caution. "Excuse me, are you looking for Ethan Walker?" The man turned, relief flooding his face. "Yes. Are you Madison Taylor? He mentioned you." "I'm David Chen, his attorney. We need to discuss something urgent." 20 minutes later, Madison sat in Chun's law office, struggling to process what she had just learned. "Ethan Walker is worth approximately $47 million, Chen explained. He inherited a construction empire from his grandfather, but walked away from it 3 years ago after a workplace accident killed 2 of his employees. He's been living modestly ever since, refusing to touch the money." Madison felt the world shift around her. "That's impossible. He draws in cafes. He wears secondhand clothes. He's been designing low-income housing projects and donating his time to homeless shelters. The sketches you've seen are architectural plans for communities that will never make him a profit." Chen slid a folder across the desk. "He's also been anonymously funding scholarship programs for engineering students." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he's finally ready to go back to work, but only if you'll partner with him. He wants to create affordable housing with sustainable design. He needs an architect he trusts, and apparently that's you." Madison stared at the plans in the folder. They were brilliant, combining innovative engineering with practical design solutions for people who had been overlooked by most developers. "There's something else," Chen continued. "He's asked me to file paperwork to make your marriage from the Gala legally binding, but only if you consent." "What marriage?" "We pretended for one evening." Chen looked confused. "Miss Taylor, you were married by a licensed officiant at the Plaza Hotel. The witnesses included your parents and 3 board members of the charity foundation. It's completely legal." Madison's hands trembled as she remembered the elderly gentleman who had performed what she thought was a ceremonial blessing before dinner. She had assumed it was part of the evening's entertainment. He knew, she whispered. Ethan knew it was real. He wanted to tell you that night, but you seemed so relieved when you thought it was just pretend. He was afraid you'd feel trapped. Madison left the law office in a daze. Everything she thought she knew about the past week had been turned upside down. She was married to a millionaire who lived like he had nothing and who had spent 3 years in self-imposed exile over a tragedy that wasn't his fault. She found Ethan at the café the next morning, sketching as usual, when he saw her approach. His face showed a mixture of hope and resignation. You know, she said, sitting across from him. He nodded. David said he would tell you. Why didn't you? Ethan set down his pencil. Because I wanted you to choose me for who I am, not what I have. And because you'd been hurt by someone who ran away from commitment. I didn't want you to think I was trying to trap you. Madison studied his face, seeing him clearly for the first time. The Gala. You knew exactly what to say to Morrison because you've been in his world before. I grew up in that world. I know how those people think, how they measure worth. I also know it's not the only way to live. And the marriage? Real, but only if you want it to be. We can have it annulled tomorrow if that's what you prefer. Madison was quiet for a long time, processing everything. Finally, she reached across the table and took his hand. I have a question about your housing project, she said. Plan to handle the foundation work on unstable soil. Ethan's face broke into a slow smile. Are you asking as my architect or my wife? Both, Madison replied, surprised by how right the word felt. Definitely both. 6 months later, Madison stood in the construction site of their first affordable housing complex, watching Ethan explain safety protocols to a group of workers. The project would provide homes for 50 families who had been priced out of the UC city. She touched the simple gold band on her finger, thinking about how differently her life had unfolded than she had planned. Nathan's abandonment had felt like the end of everything, but it had actually been the beginning of something better. Mrs. Walker, one of the workers, called out, Your husband wants to show you the community garden space. Madison smiled and walked toward Ethan, grateful for the text message that had destroyed her old life and led her to this new one. Sometimes the best foundations were built on the ruins of what came before. The end asterisk like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.